Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming. And as is custom here, I start out with a limerick, which is a passion of mine. So we start out with a limerick covering the topic that we're going to discuss today. So are you ready? Shabbat is the Jews' day of rest. All the foods that we eat are the best. We should know the laws of cooking because the holy Shabbat will be blessed. So that's just a start to get us into it. First of all, let me once again give my disclaimer, which I like to do, especially we've got a couple new people here today. Remember, as Elena said, I am a mashgiach. A mashgiach does kosher supervision wherever food is made or food is served. I am not a rabbi. I am knowledgeable about the laws in kashrut, but I did not have to take a test on all the laws of kashrut. So whatever I say here is to teach and to inform. My purpose is just that. It's not to have anybody make any resolutions or make any decisions about what they're going to do as far as their observance. Always check with a rabbi before you get into that. So that being said, the laws of cooking on Shabbos, it's not really what we call cooking. It's basically what constitutes cooking and how to avoid it, how to be able to heat up food and to be able to have a Shabbat meal during the afternoon where the food, you can get a little hot food, like cholent, for example, which is going to be a good example for some of the things we're going to discuss today. So let's first talk about what cooking is. The word for cooking is bishul, B-I-S-H-U-L. But what bushel actually means is to change the quality of any substance by subjecting it to the heat of fire or the result of fire. Let me say that again. Bishul is transforming, changing the quality of any type of substance through the use of fire. And the laws of, there's 39, they're called malachas, which means work. There's 39 types of work which we are prohibited to do on Shabbat. And the source of this is from the building of the tabernacle and the maintaining of the tabernacle. The tabernacle is the same as the Mishkan. That was what housed the Ten Commandments, which the Jews carried with them at all times when they went through the desert. So that's where all the laws of Shabbat come from. And the law of cooking, like obviously the obvious question is, well, what were they cooking when they were building the Mishkan? Were they having a weenie roast or something like that and making s'mores? No, that's not the answer. What they were doing was they were cooking herbs. They were cooking herbs to make dyes. D-Y-E-S, not D-I-E-S. They're cooking herbs. And so that being one of the malachot, one of the works that they were doing to build the Mishkan of the tabernacle, so that is prohibited. 39 of them, 39 of the malachot. So when we talk about bishul, when we talk about cooking, there's only two types of substances that you can cook. There's the solid and there's the liquid. So first, let's talk about solids. A food, now, by the way, we're talking about cooking prior to Shabbat and then after Shabbat starts, which is once the sun goes down, Shabbat is formally introduced and we observe the Sabbath from that time on. So as far as solids go, And these are things that we need to know as we progress in the discussion tonight. As far as solids go, the solid has to be fully cooked. It has to be, let me drop back a second. The food has got to be at least halfway cooked. Some say a third cooked, and it has to be edible. Now, what it means by being edible, you're not going to be cooking, you're not going to be eating chicken that's half cooked. As far as beef goes, some people like it rare, which people who eat well done beef consider rare beef half cooked, but that's not the case. It's when it's to be cooked, it's got to be cooked once the food is edible. Cooking something that's half cooked, once you start cooking it on Shabbat, then it becomes edible. Now there's a situation that happened once. I was a mashgiach in the synagogue where I belonged, and we had a caterer who, and the synagogue did not have a full service kitchen. It had a warmer, and the warmer was basically used. The food was put in before Shabbat, and it was to stay warm. So for the Sabbath, for the meal on Friday, we would have hot food. But what would happen sometimes is that the caterer would know that they've got a warmer in the synagogue, and he would bring in chicken that was basically only half cooked, knowing that if you put it in the warmer, that by the time Shabbat came in, it would be okay to serve. Or he could use the warmer to heat it up before Shabbat. Either way, that's not allowed. It's not allowed, and I'll explain to you later when we get into discussion about the blech. So food that has been fully cooked can be warmed up, can be heated, and the concept is that there is, and when it comes to solids, there is no cooking after cooking, meaning that once a food is fully cooked, it cannot be further cooked. The same is not true about solids. There is cooking after cooking. And I'll give you the example of chicken soup. Let's say, for example, that you're having company and your chicken soup is you have it on the blech, which we're going to get to very soon. And the chicken soup is hot, ready to eat. And there's a concept there, it's called yad soledet bo. Yad is hand, soledet means heat, and bo, come. So I mean, it's a cliche, so to speak. But the food, a liquid, is fully cooked. When yad soledet bo means that if you put your hand on it or near it or on it or dip your finger in it, you withdraw it right away. And it's usually said to be 110 degrees, at least 110 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to have to, Catherine, you're going to have to figure out what that is in Celsius. Anybody else here from Canada or any other countries where they use that? No.
I understand.
All right, Catherine, you'll figure that out for us. So for that matter, there is, when it comes to chicken soup, there is cooking. When it comes to liquid, there is cooking after cooking. You can reheat warm chicken soup. You cannot reheat cold chicken soup. The difference being, if it's cold, now everybody knows that at one time we had a chicken soup cooking over the holiday. It was a yontif that coincided with Shabbat. It was 3 days, and we kept the chicken soup on a very, very low flame. And by the time the third day came around, completely, and the chicken soup was no longer yellow, it was brown. It was delicious. It was really great. It was more like a stew. But it was, there is cooking after cooking. It does change the concept, the character of the food itself. So there let's talk about the blech first before I get into the next concept. The blech is a Yiddish word. It's a piece of sheet metal, or a piece of not aluminum foil so much, but like a tin, like a tin, the stuff that tin pans are made of, you could use for a blech. A blech covers the burners on the stove. It's usually a square or rectangular piece of metal that covers the burners on the stove. It's usually at least 2 burners, maybe it could cover the whole stove. So now we know what a blech is. So let me get onto this next type of thing regarding bishul, so we can understand what I'm saying. Once a food is put on the blech, if it is not fully cooked, you cannot stir it. That is considered bishul. That is considered cooking. Because if you stir the soup, we used to have a song I used to do preschool kids, stir the soup and make it hot, make it ready for Shabbat, everybody. So Fred, you're not singing. So stirring the soup, what it does, it actually, the motion of stirring will cause the liquid to I'm not going to say cool off, but it will change the temperature of the liquid. And by changing the temperature of the liquid, it could be, you could further cook it. So that's why we do not, when the food is on the blech, we cannot stir it if it's, until it's fully cooked. Also, let's say, for example, you have a food that's sitting on the blech and Shabbat already started, and you want to see how it's doing, so you lift up the lid. Can't do that, because if you put the lid back on it, it's going to change the temperature of the liquid and will cause it to cook. So 2 things, no stirring and no uncovering the pot or covering the pot if it hasn't been covered. So let's get into the blech right now, so we can talk about that a little bit further. There's a concept, a Jewish concept called maris ayin. Maris ayin means the way something appears. A good example of maris ayin, let's say that one of your friends asked you to go join them for lunch at a McDonald's, and you keep kosher and you're not going to have a quarter pounder with cheese, but maybe you go into McDonald's simply for the coffee. And if it's plain coffee, that's generally not a problem, although some people will say that is a problem because you don't know how they washed the utensils that makes the coffee. But anyway, so let's say you go in there just for a cup of coffee, you didn't do anything improper, but you walk out of the McDonald's and some person sees you walking out of the McDonald's and they'll go, aha, this McDonald's must be kosher because Chaim Yankel just ate there and came out, and he obviously wouldn't eat at a non-kosher restaurant. So that's what maris ayin is, the way something appears. When you have a blech on your stove, anybody eating at your house will see that there's something covered on the stove, and that would signify that you are not cooking on Shabbat, although you are serving hot food. But that's one of the reasons that we have a blech. Also, not everybody does this, but sometimes people cover the dials for the stove. The reason for this, here's another concept. It's called building a fence around Torah. What that means is that we have all these laws for Shabbat, laws for everything. And building a fence around Torah means that you are keeping a person from the maybe the urge, not a necessity, but the urge to do something. Like, for example, let's say you're cooking on Shabbat and you're afraid that you didn't turn the pot up too high, and you might have the urge to turn it up. Well, if the dials are all covered, then you won't have to do that. A very common one that I first learned was that it says we should not smell flowers on Shabbat. Now, there's nothing wrong with smelling flowers. You're not doing anything. But the reason they tell us not to smell flowers is because if you smell a flower and it really smells good, then you may want to bring it closer to your nose. You could cause the flower to break. So by saying don't smell flowers, don't you use a blech that keeps us from committing a transgression if we may forget. So anyway, the blech, there's actually 3 parts to the blech. One part is the part that's placed directly over the heat. So that's where if you were cooking a cholent or having a chicken soup, that's where you would initially put it, because you don't put food on the blech after Shabbat starts. There's things that you can do, we'll get to that later. But after Shabbat starts, you're not putting anything new on the blech. So the one part that you put on before Shabbat is section A, which is directly over the heat. The next section is section B, which is adjacent to the heat, and it's hot. It's not hot like it is over the flame, but you could still put food on there and that's been on the blech that could keep it hot, or even warm it up a little bit. We'll get into that. And the third section is section C, which is not hot at all. It just happens to be there, and you may want to just put food down on there just so you know. So it may have a little teeny bit of heat attached to it, but not enough to cook. Not enough to cook the food. Okay, there. So the blech really comes into place after Shabbat starts, and you can take food off of the blech, or you can move it to different parts of the blech. But if you take it off for one reason or another, let's say you've got the cholent, which is cooking on Shabbat, and you remove it from the blech to put it on your table to serve. There have to be 4 conditions before you can put it back on the blech. The first condition is that the food has been completely cooked, 100% completely cooked. And second condition is that it has not cooled off. It may have gotten warm, but it may have cooled off. And the third condition is that your intention was to return it to the blech. It has to be your intention. And the fourth is that you're also, once you take the pot and put it on the table, you're supposed to keep your hand on the handle. You're never supposed to remove your hand from the pot. So those are the 4 conditions. Food must be completely cooked. You must have the intention of putting it back. It could not have cooled off, and you have to have your hand on the pot. So that basically covers what the blech is and how it's used. And now we're going to talk about vessels, which are called kelim. A keli is a vessel. Kelim are vessels. So when I talked about the 3 parts of the blech, the main pot, and we're going to use cholent, or we can use chicken soup as an example. It really doesn't matter, but let's use cholent because it can make more points with this. So that is a vessel. It's called keli rishon, means the first vessel. That is the vessel that the food was cooked in. That's the vessel that the food is served from, and that's the hottest. So how would you serve a cholent? on Shabbat? Well, the way that most people do it is to take a ladle and to take the ladle and put the ladle into a bowl that's being served to the person. So the pot is called the Keli Rishon, the first vessel. The ladle itself is called the Keli Sheni. It's the second vessel. The bowl, Keli Shlishi, the third, is the receptacle from Keli Sheni. So there's one, Keli Rishon is the pot, Keli Sheni is the ladle, Keli Shlishi is the bowl. This gets complicated. And by the way, I'm covering the basics. We're going to get into a little more detail next week. But you need to understand the basics before we get to the detail, because the laws of Shabbat are extremely complex. As a matter of fact, there's books written just about a blech on the different uses and how to use it and what to be careful of, what to be aware of. There's books written about bishul, about cooking, because there's just so much. So whatever I tell you, remember, call up your rabbi and say, hey, this guy in Chicago, no, I'm not in Chicago anymore. This guy from Chicago told me blah, 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 and check to make sure that that's right. So anyway, the Keli Rishon, the first Keli, that can cook anything. What I mean by that is that it's the first vessel. When it's put on there, the food is not going to be fully cooked. I mean, you start a cholent, you basically start the cholent from scratch. And you put it into the pot, Keli Sheni, Rishon. The second vessel, the Keli Sheni, it still can be cooked from there. Let's say that you wanted to put a chicken soup, for example. Let's say you had too much chicken soup in the one pot and wanted to put it into another pot. So you pour it into another pot. So that would be the Keli Sheni. And the temperature of that is still not as hot as the Rishon, because it's placed in a different part of the blech, a little closer, further away from the heat, but it still has the capacity to cook. The third vessel cannot cook. So there's an interesting concept here with the ladle. I wasn't going to get into this tonight, but we might as well, because we talked about ladles. Let's say that you're planning on serving, let's say you have 12 people at your house, and instead of putting the pot on the dining room table, you serve right from the stove, which is fine. So let's say that you do this, that you leave the keli, you leave the ladle in the pot. If you leave that ladle in the pot for several minutes, it becomes part of the Keli Rishon. Once again, if the ladle is left in the pot for a period of several minutes, it becomes a Keli Rishon. Now you say to yourself, what is the difference between a Keli Rishon and the Keli Sheni? The difference here is that the bowl, which when we served it with the ladle, at the time we put it in the bowl is for the first bowl, for the first serving of cholent. Let me drop back again. I don't want to be confusing. All right, let's say you got 5 people lined up to spoon out the cholent for them, okay? So you take the ladle and you take a scoop and you put it into the bowl. And then you return that ladle to the pot and you leave it there for 2 minutes, okay? In the first instant, you serve the ladle into the bowl. The ladle was the Keli Sheni. The bowl became the Keli Shlishi. So now, with the Keli Shlishi, as I said before, the Keli Shlishi cannot cook anything. So therefore, you can put croutons in your soup or in your cholent, or you can put pieces of bread, you can put crackers, you can do that. If the bowl then is served after the ladle has sat in the bowl for a period of time, that means the ladle becomes a keli sheni. It becomes a keli rishon. You put that into the bowl now is the keli sheni, and you can't put crackers or croutons into the soup from there because, as you said before, the keli sheni can still cook something. The keli shlishi cannot cook something. So that's why the best idea is, if you're using a ladle, take it out of the pot after each serving. But this can present another problem. The problem is this: if you take it out, you could get some residue from the soup, from the cholent, on the ladle. In that case, the ladle has to be completely cleaned off and dried. If it's not cleaned off and you've got some residue left that stays on the ladle from the cholent, and it's gotten cold, and then you dip that ladle back into the pot, you're cooking. So that's why if you remove the ladle after each serving, you have to make sure that there's nothing left on the ladle from the soup or the cholent, so you don't violate the Shabbos laws. So let's cover one more thing and we'll stop for the night. I know some of this stuff is pretty heavy, and I hope if you're not clear on that, you'll ask some questions. But one of the things that is important on Shabbat is making of coffee or making of tea. If you take water and pour it on instant coffee, directly instant coffee, you're cooking. If you pour from a urn into a cup and you put a tea bag into that cup, you're cooking. Here's how to avoid it. Same thing as before we said with the cholent. It's involved 3 vessels. The urn or the kettle that's got the hot water is keli rishon. So what you do is, let's say you want to make yourself a cup of coffee on Shabbat and there's instant coffee. You take that kettle or the urn and pour it into a cup, a styrofoam cup, whatever. Then you take that styrofoam cup, which is keli sheni, which still can cook, pour it into a third cup, which is the keli shlishi, you can't cook anymore. So then you take your instant coffee after it's been poured from the urn to a second cup, to a third cup. You put in your coffee, you put in your sugar, you put in your milk, you're fine. Tea is a little more complicated. It works the same way. You take the urn, pour it to a cup, and pour it to a third cup, and then you put in the tea bag. Now the question is, to avoid violating, it's not cooking anymore once it's in the third cup, and so you're fine, but it's how you remove the tea bag. If you're going to take the tea bag and sit there and dunk it back and forth, that is considered straining. That was something that was used in the building and the maintenance of the Mishkan. You can't do that. Nor can you take a tea bag and just like lift it right out and then throw it in the garbage, because what you're doing is that is separation. You can't do that either on Shabbat. So what you basically do is this: if you take the tea bag and you're done with it, you take it and you put a spoon under it, and then let the tea bag sit on the spoon, let it, all the liquid come out of it, and then you throw your tea bag into the garbage and you're done, you're safe. So those are the laws of tea and coffee. There's a little more to that, but I think that's a good way to start next week's program. So let's do this. Let's, everybody, I'm going to ask you that you unmute yourselves. If you have any questions, go right ahead. Don't be ashamed to ask anything, because it's, like I say, it was a very heavy-duty discussion. So let's open it up for questions. Okay. And by the way, welcome to Tammy Hunter. Tammy, are you there? I don't think Tammy's there. Okay. Anybody here? If I haven't unmuted you, just raise your hand and I will. Anybody have any questions?
So I was kind of wondering that, are these laws in the Torah, or are these laws halacha? Are they like, just passed down?
The answer to your questions are yes, yes, and yes. We're having towards the end of the session, we're having a session based on where do all these things come from. Yes, some come from Torah. Yes, some come from Talmud. Yes, some come from rabbinical decisions. Various areas. Most of the laws that we're talking about, the cooking on Shabbat, would not be directly from the Torah. They would probably be from some other source that discusses these things. Did I answer your question?
You did, because it's almost like a sliding scale.
Well, like I say, these laws are very, very complex.
They are.
And you can, everybody now has an extensive library of Jewish knowledge. It's called the internet. All of the major kashrut agencies have websites. All you got to do is like for example, I had a question that came up in my own head just before the class started, and I went right on Google and I said, and I just wrote out the question, and I got a dozen answers, and not all of them were the same.
I was going to just say, right?
Yeah, no, because like I say, because of the complexity of these laws, they're open for interpretation, and because of that, there's many different answers. So anyway, Eleanor Lieberman had a question. What do you do with the lid of the pot while serving? Good question. The lid of the pot while you're serving you're supposed to keep that in your hand, but keep that with you too. You're not supposed to separate the lid from it has to maintain some proximity to the pot itself.
So what if you bring the pot to the table?
If you bring a pot to the table while you're serving it, you always have one hand on the thing, and if you have big hands like I do, you can also hold the lid and just hold it next to the pot. And this is one of these things. I read something about that, and one of the rabbis said, if you don't have to take the lid with you, you can leave it to the side. I'm telling you what I learned from my training. So that's why I always say check with the rabbi.
What if you put the lid down and return the pot to position C and the black, which is the least form?
Then you can put the lid back on, because that's not good. I mean, the food is fully cooked anyway, so you're fine no matter what.
It might be a little warm, but it wouldn't cook.
Right, right. Good question.
What if you're using a slow cooker? Say you're doing cholent,
Okay,
and what happens when the temperature changes in it? And with the lid, I know you have to have your hand on it. There seems to be a lot of things going on there.
well, with the slow cooker, the main concept is like you're gonna, I mean, the slow cooker has got to be covered. And see,
Right.
when you've got a pot, like when I'm making a cholent, what I do is like, while it's cooking, I'm constantly looking at it, tasting it, adding stuff to it. When Shabbat starts, then you really can't do that anymore. But with the slow cooker, once you put it in there, it's usually you stay there, because if you open it up, it's gonna throw all your cooking back. So I mean, with the crock pot, the slow cooker, I don't like using it for that reason, because you can't play with it.
Right. And I know the newer slow cookers will step down, like you'll start it at a certain temperature and it'll automatically go down to like a holding pattern. Is that allowed or is it not?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a really good question. Because if it's programmed to do it, just practically speaking, I think there's no problem.
Okay.
But the thing is too, it's the concept of like compare it to a regular pot. If you've got that pot cooking, once Shabbat starts, you can't lower the heat. So the question is on the slow cooker, when does that kick in? While it's cooking? After it's cooking?
Right. I think it's many hours in. I think it's a programmable thing.
Okay.
That's
So I
what
mean, like
my slow cooker, you can set, it has a digital timer on it and it does that. But like she asked, I mean, you never really know. You'd have to probably mess with it during the week to figure out when, it wouldn't be something I would probably just wing it on Shabbat, but you can set it up to 12 hours on high and then to go to medium and then to low. But probably if you figured it out during the week, probably be okay.
Mel, I think that's a good answer. We're about to do the same thing. We've got these Sultan hot trays, which I don't think we've used. I think we got them for shower gifts. So we haven't used them for some time. So we're gonna check it out to see if we can use
They
it.
still work. They
I
still
also
work.
want-
I've had one forever.
They, with the slow cookers and also the, one rabbi said with the salt on trays, you cover them with tin foil. So it's a black idea. In the slow cooker, you've got a bag in the cooker,
Right.
which is covered in tin foil inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Who else has got something
Alan,
gnawing at them?
going back to the coffee and the tea,
Yes.
if you're using a tea essence, a strong tea
Ah.
mixture that's been mixed before, do the same rules apply when you're adding the concentrated coffee or the concentrated tea? You do it to the keli shlishi?
No, because the tea essence has already it's fully cooked. It's already
Okay.
been cooked. So yeah, I tried that at the synagogue where I was a mashgiach at. People didn't like it. It was a synagogue. It was an Orthodox synagogue, but most of the people who came there were not, and they didn't want to bother with it. So, but no, you don't have to do. Once you got the essence, just pour the hot water in there. You're fine.
Hmm.
Fred?
Okay, when the cholent has been cooking, started cooking before Shabbat, and it stays in the warmer, does it have to remain below a certain temperature in the warmer so that it's not considered to be cooking? Does the warmer have to stay below a certain temperature?
Question.
Does what do you mean what are we talking
Well,
about?
because, because
here? A
sometimes,
crock pot? What are we talking about?
well, no, I mean, just sometimes the cholent in synagogue, sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's very warm, and sometimes it's quite hot. And I just wondered, it just,
No, there's no, once it's fully cooked, it doesn't matter. There's no, there's no question about what the temperature is.
oh,
It's not an issue. The issue is whether it's cooked, fully cooked or not.
but I guess warmers, you can set, a warmer has a range of temperatures, obviously, right? And
Yes.
okay. And my other question is, can we think of another word for blech?
Can we?
It means a metal sheet.
Metal sheet. Yeah, some people have problems with the like a lot of time, a lot of places I've been working where I work, people wonder what I'm doing there, and then like the executive chef says, "Oh, here, this is the mashkia." The mashkia? What's a mashkia? So anyway, yeah, Fred, I think that you come out. That's your homework assignment. Just before grades come out, if you do a good homework assignment, I don't know what another word for a blech is. It's a piece of tin. It's a sheet metal.
Okay. Then, yeah, you have to have a lot of hyphens in there. Is there a Hebrew word for it too, or no? It's blech is the Yiddish, and that's
The Hebrew word is blech. There's three chets at the end.
I wonder what the Sephardim call it. That's
A bleh, a bleh.
a blech.
Well, the Sephardim have their own foreign types of cholent, which are they do a really interesting cholent. They put an egg in there.
They're delicious.
And the egg gets cooked. It's unbelievable. The egg actually, even through the shell, absorbs the taste of the cholent.
Wow.
You've never eaten an egg, a hard-boiled egg that's brown on the outside.
Wow.
And-
Egg and kishka on top.
oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
that's good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, anyway, thank you all. I hope I didn't confuse anybody.
Alan, one more question on the coffee, instant coffee. So you take the first cup and you fill it with hot water from the urn.
Yes,
Then you pour the hot water from that cup into a second cup.
yes.
And then you pour the water into a third cup.
No, you pour it from the urn to
Yeah.
1 cup, from the 1 cup into a second cup.
Oh, and then you can take a spoonful of instant coffee.
Yes,
And can you stir? You can stir.
yes. Yeah,
Okay.
once you're in the third
Okay.
vessel,
Okay,
there's no cooking.
I see. Okay,
There's
gotcha.
no cooking.
Gotcha.
All right, so come back next week. We're going to,
You didn't blow the whistle. You didn't blow
No,
the
we're
whistle.
not, next week, we're.
next week I blow the whistle. See, I only blow the whistle if I have something really weird or different. And I mean, usually I spend a certain amount of time doing research and everything. And this week I did way too much research. Not, I'm saying that in a good way. I mean, there's so much here, as you see. So I didn't come up with did you know, but next week I will.
Okay.
And next week too, I hope that you will have come up with a proper word for blech.
I'm gonna Google right now.
Go ahead.
There's gotta be. The Sephardim have to have another
You're gonna
word.
go to Rabbi Google. All right.
Fred, when you ask a Jewish question on Google, it's called Jugal.
Google.
There's a very interesting website which I just found today. It's called Halachapedia instead of Wikipedia.
Oh, that's good.
Halachapedia.
That's good.
I didn't check to see what the source of it is, but it's worth looking into. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Keep
Bye.
good. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night. Good night.
Good night.
Everybody have a good week. Shabbat tov.
Good talk.
You too.